Fantastic. All right, we are just getting started here with our assignment number 3 review. I'm gonna go ahead and open up our stuff. Where are we in right now? We're in JavaScript. Cool. Go down here to assignment number 3. Beautiful Mars rover. So as you all know, I never took launch code beforehand, and I started in liftoff. And so I would only get LC 101 people into liftoff to start that portion of the mentoring. And all I would always hear is everything about Mars rovers, like Mars rover. So this is kind of a new thing. I did it with the last class. I'm doing it with you all to do this walkthrough to try to at least alleviate some of those pains of bringing everything we've learned up into this 3rd assignment. So awesome. Let's go ahead and we're going to just take a look through the assignment, kind of like what we've done with studio reviews. So what we're going to do, so these tasks put unit testing, modules, making and exceptions, knowledge handling. Let me double check that. I am recording. To running tests and classes for the Mars rover named Curiosity. Awesome. So you will create a simulation for issuing commands to Curiosity. The idea is to create a command at mission control, convert that command into a message, and then send it over to the rover. So it sounds like we need to get a command, or excuse me, let's see, you'll create a simulation for using commands. The idea is to create a command at mission control, convert it. Yeah, it will respond to the message. So it sounds like we are using a bunch of objects to send information over to the rover, and the rover will be sending stuff back. So that's what we got at a high level just right now. We will provide descriptions of the required features you will need to implement in the 3 separate classes. That is a very good keyword there, classes. It sounds like we're going to be creating 3 classes. And from our last class, we should be able to know how to do that. So we have the command class, the message class, and the rover class. Each of these have varying types within them. We won't dive too much into it right now, but at least we know where to reference the 3 main classes that are going to be driving our rover during this assignment. This is a very important section right here. This is going to tell you everything about your classes, the things that will be driving the rover, and the things that will help us complete the assignment always. So this highlighted section is a constant area that I reference when helping students out with this assignment. All right, in true TDD form, you will be asked to first write the appropriate unit test for these features, then write the code in the given class to pass those tests. Sorry, my reading ability is getting there. Give me like 2 more sips of coffee. Sections, all these fun sections. Get the starter code. We are in the starter code over here. There. Awesome. And so how to do TDD. Test-driven development, as we talked about previously in class, test-driven development is where we create the tests first, and then we code after to make those tests pass. So that's what we do TDD for. Feel free to review the test code cycle while you work on this project. All right, focus at 1 test at a time. Focus at 1 test at a time. First part right here, the biggest thing I can tell you, do not try to skip around in this assignment at all. You will hurt yourself. Literally, physically, and mentally, you will hurt yourself. Do not try to skip around. It hurts. If anything, go task by task. If you get stuck at a specific task, reach out to colleagues, reach out to your TAs, reach out to me to get you unstuck. Do not try to skip around. I cannot repeat that enough. Write the test and then create the code to make it pass. Of course, TDD, only write the minimum amount of code needed to make each test pass. Well, that's always the goal there. Thank you for that one. There are some constraints on how you can implement these features. A description of each class is below. Obviously, we're going to get more into those 3 main classes that are going to be driving our rover. Each numbered item describes a test. You should use the given phrases as the test descriptions when creating your it statements, that it statement being in those describes, okay, inside those unit tests. You must create 13 tests for this assignment. Well, that's a good strong number there, 13, very lucky. All right, those are our general instructions for this. The biggest thing again is do not try to skip around, use TDD, aka writing the test first and then doing the code. Also, do not edit the working parts of the code that they give you previously. All that stuff is supposed to be there. Do not edit it to try to make it work. it will just get you more of a headache. So before we start hopping into more and more specific things here, any questions or anything else you want me to dive deeper into about that general part of the assignment? All right. So for the command class description, commands, we're just going to generally look at what they're going to be doing here. So real quick, let's go over to the Mars rover. So we went over the general instructions. Now, typically what I would do is go into the code, like, let's see what they actually give us to play with. So we have our index.js. This looks like it's all that Jasmine stuff, okay, that testing stuff. So we don't want to touch this. So what happens if we click run? Because I know there's test there. It says npm test. And it says a bunch of other spec stuff. So neat. I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. Command.js looks like a command class is beginning to be written. Message is written a little bit. It just gives us class. That's about it, and exports it. And then Rover. Cool. Okay. So basically, they give you some stuff for the command, but they give you nothing for message and Rover. Okay. Also, one more thing too, I had a message from Clark here about the assignment to the first question about part 1, and we'll go ahead and hop over there real quick. We're going to scroll past this. I think what you said was part 1, correct? So I'm assuming this is part 1 and what I'm talking about. Yeah. So it said to write test 2 and 3. But if we go over to the spec, they are already written. Yes, Clark wanted me to mention that is an error in the assignment. You don't have to write 2 and 3. It's already written for you. So it's a good error. It's almost kind of a little tricky there, but yeah, you won't have to deal with that. All right. Does that help out a little bit, just to answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Real quick, just to start out, let's go ahead and just look at the first test 1 and dive into it in depth, and then we'll move on to part 3, because that was another specific area I got a question about. So command test, test number 1. To begin, open and examine spec/command/spec.js. One test has been created for you. When a user creates a new command object from the class, we want to make sure that they pass command type as the first argument. All right, so first things first, examine spec/command.spec. Command.spec.js. Ooh, look at a bunch of code here. So it says 1 test has been created for you. 3 tests have been created for us, just an FYI. Let me go back over here and see 1, 2, 3. 3 tests, aka each of those if statements are tests. When a user creates a new command from the object, we want to make sure that they pass a command type in the first argument. Test number 1. Note that the test description reads, throws error if a command type is not passed into the constructor at the first parameter. Really note in this description that it says throws. We are checking to see if an error occurs. That's basically what this is saying. So when you see throws there, we're basically checking to see if something has been thrown, an error has occurred. So far you have used expectations to check for equality in the chapter on exceptions. We shared an example of how we might use an expectation. Is that what they're trying to say? Expectation? To check if the exception is thrown. Refer back to the example for guidance on the syntax. Click run to verify that the test passed. Next, comment at lines 4 through 6 on JS. Run it again to verify that the test fails. That's a big one too. Also, if you are testing this, so we're going to go ahead and just do that. It's literally just telling us what to do. So in the first, we are looking at this first test right here, throws an error command if it's not passed. We go ahead and run this. Command class throws error if is not passed into spec. I'm trying to see why isn't it telling me if or if not that it is running. Spec. All right, let's go see if we can make it fail. So it said if we come into command.js and comment out lines 4 through 6. So I'm just going to go and do a block there, block comment. Let's go and see what happens now. There we go. All right, we do get an error. We get finally a test failed here. It also tells us what test failed. So it tells us that this one up here, the failure and the expectation was not met. So basically, we did not get back what we were expecting in that test. This is showing us a failure right here. So that's awesome. So with that, that is it for, looks like test 1 through 3. I think those are pretty much written out. Can anyone verify that? I think 1 through 3 now in the assignment is basically written for us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So I thought, okay. So what we just saw, we talked about the overview of the assignment, and we kind of dove a little bit into running and kind of working through this code. So with our allotted time here, I'm going a little bit fast here because honestly, I'm just reading the assignment. I want to get to the actual meat and trying to answer all those questions, but it looks like we have our code up and ready. We know what the assignment is kind of asking for. Basically, those 13 tests to pass. So I'm going to turn it over to you all, and I'm going to click through this one outside of the command. Going to, where is step 2? Sections, command class, message class, that's what I need. So I'm going to go over to the message class here. Anything in particular? So I got a part 3, but anything in part 2 in the message class? Anybody have a general question, specific question you want to talk about with this part of the assignment?
I'm a little confused about test 6.
6, all right. The description reads, contains a command array passed into the constructor as second argument. This test confirms that the commands property of a new message object contains the data passed in from the message call. Okay. So what it's asking for, it looks like, let's see, it just confirms that the commands property of a new message object contains the data passed in from the message. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So for this one, making sure that we are all on track with what these objects are, we have 3 different classes here. We have the commands and the message and the rover. So if we look in the message, well, I have nothing written there, or for the command. Tell me this, does anyone, well, actually, I apologize. I have to keep myself, I'm in studio review mode here. Like, don't tell me. But what we want to look at is over here. And what we need to ask ourselves, we have message and commands, and it looks like they are very tightly related with each other. Commands and message have some sort of relationship. So what you should be asking yourself is, does commands have messages in it, or does messages have commands in it, or what kind of relationship do they have between each other? That kind of relationship well, don't tell me, but that kind of relationship is going to define how these tests interact, especially number 6. Number 6 is asking us to see if the commands array passed into, or to see if, again, we're in the message spec, so we're testing the message object. So in the regards of the message object, does it contain a commands array passed into its constructor? So what this is telling me, without reading anything about the message thing, is that a constructor here would possibly have to take in some sort of commands array. And that's what we're testing here. It's a lot like test 1 in a sense, where we're testing to see if the things coming through the constructor are actually properly set in the object. So Micah, I'll turn it back over to you. What do you exactly have confusion around, or any kind of knowledge gap around, that you'd want to dive deeper into about test 6?
I think the expect statement is perhaps where I'm getting confused. Just as far as, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we wanted to see if information, let me go ahead and just open up this. What lecture is this now? Are we on 12? What lecture is it going to be tonight? Oh, come on. This is barely the toughest question I'm going to ask tonight.
It is 12.
It is 12. All right. All right. There we go. So the expect statement is what we are kind of talking about here. We need to figure out what should we be checking and what should we be checking against. So hypothetically, say we have our class here and we have our dog class as always. And what I have in here is always a constructor. There we go. And then of course this to set the class variable for the name equals name and name. Now, if I wanted to create a dog variable, I would say let my dog equal new dog. Now, where am I going with this? Hold on tight, I promise. What we're looking for in the message class is to check to see if things are set properly, aka that commands array is set properly. We're looking at this dog object and we want to test our dog object to see if its properties are being set properly. What we would do is that we need to first set the dog to have something to actually test against, but then we actually need to see if its properties are set correctly inside of the object itself. So I know we're not in a test right here, but essentially what we would do is that we want to check what. So we have our let's go ahead and say a let actual and our let expected here. If I asked you to check my dog's constructor to make sure its name is set correctly, what would be my actual and what would be my expected? Does anyone know either of these possibly?
Expected is Stark.
Very good. The expected would be Stark. Very good. What would be my actual?
Actually be the one we pass
Yes.
while calling that.
Dog.name.
Exactly. We need to check
This.
the actual object that was created and the
In the
property
new
that's
dog.
inside of it.
My dog.
My
My
dog.
dog.
My
dot
dog.
name.
My dog.
Dog name.
This right here, if we were in a testing environment, would be the two pieces we need to create an expectation. We have our actual, which is the stuff inside of the object, and what we need to check it against, the expected. Now, this is a simplistic example because it's just a string, right? Like, that's awesome. But what if we said maybe instead we wanted to also add a list of favorite toys here? Now for this one, we no longer have Stark, but instead we have a list of toys as well. Now this is a little bit more complex. This isn't just a string. This isn't just a number. What is it? What is toys?
Array.
It's an array. It's actually a data container. It contains a lot of information inside of it. What's another kind of data container we talked about our data structure?
Object.
The object.
An object. Now, if our test asked us now to test to see if our toys array was created properly, what would be our actual and what would be our expected?
My dog toys. Actual.
Good. So yes, we could also do my dog dot toys. Well, my dog, or sorry, it would be
Toys.
The array.
bone. Now, one thing about this and why it can get a little bit tricky with this one is that, remember, if we try to compare two arrays, sometimes they are not the same. Remember, these are two different boxes, right here and right here. So technically, if we didn't expect on our actual and expected right now, we have the potential of actually getting a false back, that they are not the same containers, because they're not. They're two different boxes. So when it comes to this, when we are trying to test to see if an object is equal to another object, we need to make sure it stays the same object or the same array. So how we could do this in this dog regard is what we can say is, let's call let my toys equal that array. And then look at what we do next. We say my toys here. And now my actual would still be this, it's from the object, but my expected would be my
toys.
The original array. So we hold on to that original reference container as it's passing through that constructor to actually do a correct expect against them. If we didn't want to do this way, another one would be to loop through each iteration of the object and check that as well. But this is a way we can hold on to that reference of the array, pass it through the constructor, and still compare it at the very end to make sure that that data still lines up. So this right here can be slightly tricky when it comes to testing because it gets into those references and those pointers that we can't visibly see. We have to keep them basically in our heads. So this can be a tricky thing. This is just a little huge, big hint, using a dog to assist in maybe other functions. All right. Does that kind of explain a little bit there about what's going on? Possibly some
100%.
problems that we might be seeing. Awesome. It's a little lesser piece of a conversation we typically have, literally about that, because testing was so quick. Cool. All right, last thing I'm going to do here, well, we still have a little bit of time, and I have a little bit of coffee left in me. We're going to go over to part 3, and we're going to talk about 1A. Is that correct? Part 3, Rover
Three.
class.
I wasn't sure just what it was asking.
Which are we talking about? Is it test 8?
Oh, it was specifically just 1A, that statement. I guess
Oh,
I
right
didn't
here.
even
Oh,
move
right here.
past
Okay.
it. Yes.
Okay, so this one is literally just describing, because they give you the exact what the constructor should be. This is just telling you what position is. You'll see this a lot because we'll just write out code here. It's like, okay, constructor with position in there. But if I have no idea and I'm just looking at this code for the first time, I'm like, what in tarnation is position? That
Okay,
answer
okay.
to what is position is right here. It's just the number representing the rover's position.
So that's
Does that
not
really
a
mean-
test I'm supposed to be writing. Okay,
No, it's just giving you a small description.
I gotcha.
Awesome. All right, that was the last question on my list here. So any other questions out there, specific or general, that we want to try to explore?
Kyle, in the Rover command types, they're talking about a generator watts variable. So do we need to change this variable anytime in this assignment? Because they talk about values for mode generator watts position will depend on current state of Rover. But anywhere in this assignment, they are talking about changing this generator watts.
So real quick, I want to make sure that
Always
this
one.
is the highlighted section is what you're talking about right now, right?
Yeah, sets default value to generated watts to 110. And at the last, come down to the last Rover command types, last of the page.
Last test.
Rover, yeah, Rover command types, they say in the status, the check, in the command, they say for mode, generator watts position will depend on current state of Rover, values for mode. But in anywhere in this assignment, they are not telling to change that.
Well, maybe not an assignment, but we can't just assume it will never change. If it's a parameter within our constructor, we need to make sure that it has the ability to change and will reflect correctly if so. But it
It's
sounds
not
like
a-
majority of the time it will be 110. Hence being why they want you to make it a default parameter. So if we want to do that, we'll have to look up how we create a default parameter. We've seen it once or twice in lecture. But to answer your question, I don't know the assignment by heart at all. At all. So I don't know exactly. But from a coding perspective, we don't want to just assume it will never change, especially if it's being a parameter. So we can't just hard code it in there. We'll have to set it as a default parameter, but have the ability to change later if necessary.
Okay.
Great question. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, Kyle, I have a question.
Yeah, Joe, what's up?
So I was doing this and I got stuck on number 10. I'm having trouble conceptualizing exactly what it's asking for, because on number 10, it's saying that for the status check command, this particular function within the object or class or whatever, the receive message function dot results should include the status, which would include the mode, generator watts, and the position. But that seems to be overlapping with what test 7 is asking us to do, where the constructor sets that position default values for the mode and generator watts, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm just kind of confused where we should be expected to, I guess, output the mode, generator, watts, and position. Is that supposed to be something that's from the Rover class itself, or is it within a function within the Rover class? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead and explore it a little bit. So with test 7 here, constructor sets position and default values for mode and generator watts. Refer to the Rover class description above for these default values. I believe that was in reference to the last question too, or helps out with the last question. Generator watts was set to 110 and mode to normal. So by default, if we're passing things through the constructor, if I don't pass anything, normal and 110 should be set to mode and generator watts respectively. As long as we're still in agreement with that.
Right.
So refer to that. Okay, so sets positions for default values. So this is checking to see if the constructor works, but primarily if the default values are set correctly.
Okay.
So this is telling me that it's checking the constructor, but it's also checking to see if the constructor is set properly with those default values if nothing is passed in.
I see.
Let's
Okay.
go to test 10 and see what it's kind of asking here. So it responds correctly to status check command. For the status check command, receive message.results includes a Rover status object describing the current state of the Rover object, the mode, generator, watts, and position. The test should check each of these for accuracy. See Rover command types for more details. So this one is telling me we're not even working with the constructor at all. Instead, we're working with its receive message function that I believe takes in a message that has commands inside of it and returns something with these results in it. Whatever that return object is, it has results in it apparently. And it includes a Rover status object. Again, these are big keywords here. Rover status object describing the current state of the Rover object. So this one is telling me not anything about the constructor, but instead does receive message when passed a proper message work as expected.
Gotcha.
So when it comes to that, test 7, making sure that that's the one that we want to compare to is testing the constructor to see if all of those class variables are set properly, and test 10 is going to test the receive message function.
Got it. I think I have a better understanding now. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, it literally pains me not to be like, guys, here it is. Like, let me help you. But I can't. Fighting it. All right, we got no more minutes. Any final questions? We can have like I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording right here.